Welcome to our presentation on the need for clarity for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. My name is Jeff Singleton, and I'm one of the co-founders of Converge Accessibility, and we are an accessibility consulting services company. I've been working in the IT field for over 25 years and have been primarily focused on digital accessibility for more than half that time. If you've been struggling with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines and how to best incorporate accessibility into your web content development lifecycle, we believe that you will find the information that we're presenting today beneficial. Before we dig into our presentation, I'd like to let my co-presenter introduce himself.
My name is Greg Rogers, and I am the Accessibility Testing Manager for Outlook Business Solutions. We provide accessibility testing services, which includes disabled user testing. With our unique testing approach, we provide evaluations against the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, along with user experience feedback from disabled users and real-world users of assistive technology. I am myself a lifelong user of assistive technology or adaptive technologies and have been completely blind since birth. Along with working in various technical fields over my career, I have also lectured on accessibility topics at various disability and technology conferences, such as this one. The purpose of this presentation is to offer a different and more realistic solution when it comes to applying Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, also known as WCAG, to the content we create. We will preview the process of breaking down the WCAG success criteria into clear concepts. We will also discuss how to tailor these concepts to the specific needs of the various team members that are part of the web developer lifecycle, such as designers, content creators, developers, and quality assurance testers. By the end, our goal is that you will understand the value of this simplified approach to bring clarity to WCAG, not just for developers, but to everyone involved in the content creation process.
Well, if you are new to accessibility and to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, you have likely experienced how they can be vague and at times confusing. This is true even for those who have been working with the guidelines for some time. On the slide, there is an image of a sign pole with several signs pointing in different directions. They include confused, uncertain, perplexed, bewildered, disoriented, and unclear. There is also an image of a stick figure businessman with his head on his desk and holding up a sign that reads, "Help." If you have ever felt this way about WCAG, this presentation is for you. So we can sum up the purpose of our approach in 2 words: better requirements. Well, what do we mean by that? The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines are structured in 4 tiers. You have principles, guidelines, success criteria, and techniques. It is the success criteria that we must conform in order to meet these requirements. Yet those success criteria can be confusing, and you will find a lot of opinions on what they mean and how to apply them. To really understand what's being required, we must examine the sufficient, the advisory, and the failure techniques that are provided with each of those success criteria. An example of what we mean by this is Success Criterion 1.3.1, Information and Relationships, which is a Level A criterion and states, information, structure, and relationships conveyed through presentation can be programmatically determined or are available in text. Well, what does that really mean? Well, you would have to review the over 50 techniques for that success criterion to understand what is being asked. So what is the secret? Well, as we mentioned, better requirements. Defining better requirements may seem like a simple thing to accomplish, and the process itself is pretty simple. But it does involve a lot more work than we may initially think. First, it's a matter of how we define those requirements and for whom. And second, it's a matter of how we allocate and then deliver those requirements. If we do those things right by following the strategies that we will outline today, we have found that web accessibility really does just simply fall into place as part of that web development lifecycle. So let's walk through how to accomplish this. The approach that we recommend involves two parts: defining the requirements, number one, and number two, delivering those requirements. Both these parts include 2 steps each, for a total of 4 steps overall. Step 1 involves breaking those often vague and confusing WCAG success criteria into bite-sized elements that we call core concepts. The current gold standard in web accessibility is conformance with WCAG 2.1 Level A and Level AA. Because the criteria can be vague, confusing, and overlap, the first step is creating a clearer understanding for exactly what each success criterion requires. Step 2 is breaking those concepts down further into interpretations for our technical and non-technical team members. For example, our design, copy, development, and QA teams. We call this the role-specific guidance. Step 3 is dividing the elements from Step 2 into a series of guides, which would be similar to checklists for each contributor's role in the web content development process. And finally, Step 4 is creating training and other resources at the core concept level, as defined in Step 1. This will tie everything together. Here, it's important that technical and non-technical team members have access to the same training and resources, as this provides transparency and reinforces the interdependencies and mutual expectations that the team members have on each other. Let's start with Step 1. How do we divide the WCAG success criteria into actionable steps? This step involves reading the success criteria and all the associated techniques very carefully and asking ourselves, what is the main ideas contained in this criterion? If you engage in this exercise, it doesn't take very long to see that the WCAG success criteria generally fall into one of 3 types of categories. First, there are the easy success criteria. For instance, Success Criterion 2.4.2 simply requires that web pages have a meaningful title that describe its topic or purpose. This prevents screen reader users and others from getting lost when they have several web pages open. These criteria are easy, and the core concept can just restate the requirement verbatim. Then there are the deceivingly complex success criteria, like 2.3.1, which prohibits content that flashes faster than 3 times per second. This is to prevent life-threatening photosensitive seizures. But when you read the requirement closely, we find that shades of red flashing are far more problematic than other colors. Plus, the size of the flashing content also makes a difference. But even here, there is a difference between whether the content is viewed on a mobile device or on a spacious desktop monitor. Therefore, after lots of research and review, we can write the core concept as flashing content shall not flash more than 3 times in 1 second and occupy a space of more than 21,824 square pixels. Lastly, there are the overly general success criteria like 1.3.1. It's only 16 words long and reads, information, structure, and relationships conveyed through presentation can be programmatically determined or are available in text. This primarily helps screen reader users make sense of the organization and relationship of a web page's content. When visually viewing a page, most sighted users do this unknowingly. Yet to explain what this success criteria encompasses, there is an assortment of around 50 different techniques that cover a myriad of different situations, all of which affect structure, information, and relationship within a web page. On the screen is an example of how we break up success criterion 1.3.1 into 7 meaningful core concepts, which are all covered by that success criterion. These topics cover things such as header structure, ARIA landmarks, tables, and grouping of related elements on the page. One example of this is our core concept 1.3.1.1 header structure, which reads simply as structure and headers follow a proper hierarchy of header tags. This is just one facet or nugget of information contained in the WCAG success criterion 1.3.1. And this is what we mean by breaking down the WCAG success criteria into understandable core concepts. If we were creating a more traditional software requirements document, we would likely stop at step 1 of this process. Yet, for this to work as planned, we break down each core concept into role-specific guidance. The term role-specific guidance is really a misnomer, as there are really 3 very general categories of roles that we need to address. First, pre-production teams such as copy authors, graphic designers, and UX engineers need these requirements restated in a non-technical manner. For instance, there's little point in telling a non-technical wireframe designer that the HTML div tag element does not accept the alt attribute, and they should use an ARIA label instead in certain situations. By contrast, that kind of technical guidance is exactly what the second group, our production teams, need when they are coding those web pages. And lastly, QA teams require guidance that provide knowledge around the test procedure or procedures to be used and what the expected outcome should be so that they can accurately evaluate if the content is meeting those core concept requirements. To help better illustrate this role-specific guidance, on the screen is what could be provided for each of those roles for core concept 1.3.1.1 header structure. And while we don't have time to read the content on the screen, as you can see on this slide, each of the roles are provided guidance on what they need to accomplish in terms that they can understand so that they can successfully apply core concept 1.3.1.1. There is no need to guess with this type of approach. The first 2 steps we just reviewed collectively define the core concepts and the role-specific guidance. The third step begins the process of distributing these core concepts to team members. This is a simple exercise of dividing up the role-specific guidance that we created in step 2 into a series of user guides or a checklist that align with the specific job roles within an organization. How we divide up the requirements may change based on our organization structure, as no 2 organizations are the same. Even so, we have found that the following basic structure works surprisingly well across most organizations and requires only minor tweaks. First, the non-technical pre-production requirements get divided into 3 role-based guides. One for copy authors, another for UX designers, and a third one for graphic artists and media creators. Next, the production requirements go straight to a role-based guide for the web developers. And lastly, the QA and testing requirements go straight to a role-based guide for the QA and testing team members. So far, we have covered a lot of details in a short period. Please don't worry if you've gotten lost, as we do have a white paper on this topic, which can be downloaded after this presentation. In the white paper, we have included a working example of what a full role-based guide for a graphics or media artist might include. Finally, the last and possibly hardest step involves creating training and other resources specific to each core concept that we initially defined in step 1. We may think that keeping training granular and separate for each role-specific requirement is a good idea, yet we have found that this is not the case. Instead, it's important to build the training and other resources at the core concept level that we defined in step 1, and not at the role-specific level that we created in step 2. And there are a few reasons for this. First, if we defined our core concepts correctly, we would likely end up with between 70 and 80 specific rules. We've also found that explaining that core concept, the associated role-specific guidance, and the key technical requirements for each core concept takes on average about 10 minutes. This is well within the attention span of most team members, so these technical resources can be easily consumed by just about anyone and immediately applied, which helps in overall understanding and knowledge retention. Second, when the technical and non-technical team members go through the same training on a specific core concept, they are able to better understand the interdependencies and expectations between other teams. For instance, copy authors will understand how the alt text that they write will be folded into the final web designs, and web developers will understand how copy authors are being guided to provide alt text so that they can include that as part of their coding process and not have to guess. Third, maintaining one resource for each of the core concepts is a lot easier than maintaining 3 different resources for each core concept. In other words, it is easier to maintain and update 70 to 80 resources on a regular basis compared to 200 plus resources. Once these resources are created, you must keep them updated for them to remain effective and in line with the latest information provided through the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. That, in a nutshell, is a better way to clarify and include accessibility into our content development lifecycle. No matter the size of the team, this approach helps everyone understand their responsibility and allows them to effectively contribute and maintain accessible web content. Again, this is a lot of information in a short period of time, and while we do have a white paper on the topic that you can download, Greg is going to give us a visual overview of what we just outlined to help provide more clarity, just in case.
Here is another way to visually represent how this process works. We begin with the WCAG level A and double A success criteria. As mentioned, these can be imprecise and confusing, as if looking at a set of guidelines floating in a cloud. To make sense of that cloud of information, we need to first bring the success criteria into actionable core concepts. These are specific ideas that each criterion is focused. And this is where most traditional requirements, documentation efforts will end. Instead, we further break those requirements down into role-specific guidance for pre-production, production, and QA testing team members. Then we compile those concepts into role-specific guides so team members can easily focus on the items they are responsible. Finally, we create on-demand training and resources for each core concept that brings the stakeholders back together as a team.
Thank you, Greg. Hopefully, you agree that the approach we just outlined has many advantages over the way we have approached web accessibility in the past. It is far more flexible and works across any web development methodology. If we are already using an automated testing solution or have periodic accessibility reviews done on our website, this process works seamlessly with those solutions. It's fast and immediate. There aren't days wasted in training that can be quickly forgotten. Instead, each training resource ties directly to a very specific requirement. This just-in-time approach gives team members exactly what they need to know when they need it and allows them to immediately apply what they just learned. It works across organizations of any size. For large organizations, this approach is very practical because you can first prove success with a smaller pilot project before rolling it out across your entire web development team. It also promotes teamwork and accountability. Each team member knows not only what they have to do, but also why it's important and how it fits in with what other team members are doing. We have just outlined a proven and effective way of infusing web accessibility into our web content development lifecycle, which can launch the accessibility of our online content like a rocket. Just like the image on the screen of the stick figure businessman, who earlier was at a loss on how to apply accessibility into his content development lifecycle. Now, he and his team have clarity and their accessibility efforts have taken off just as if he was riding a rocket as shown in our illustration. Admittedly, taking the time to put this level of effort into creating internal guides and resources like this can take a lot of time and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. If this seems out of reach for your organization, don't worry. In fact, it's probably the single most affordable and effective thing you can do for your organization's efforts toward web accessibility. The reason is that this is very affordable is because we've already created it for you. We'd like to introduce you to WebAlign. WebAlign breaks down the accessibility guidelines and provides resources to better understand and implement accessibility into our web content, as we have just outlined. WebAlign also includes other features to help minimize the effort required to understand accessibility, and we are working on new features to help this to be the just-in-time training and compliance resource of choice. If you would like to find out more about this revolutionary approach to web accessibility, please visit our website at convergeaccessibility.com and select Product and Services and then select WebAlign. While we encourage organizations to do this work for themselves, WebAlign does offer an affordable alternative for those who need to apply this clarity to creating accessible content immediately. For your reference, here are the links to the resources mentioned today. Converge Accessibility's website, convergeaccessibility.com, Outlook Business Solutions, outlookbusinesssolutions.com. The white paper we mentioned, the better requirements for web accessibility, you can get that at convergeaccessibility.com/whitepaper13. The number is 13, so whitepaper 13, all lowercase. And of course, our WebAlign site, you can get through our Converge Accessibility site or through our WebAlign shortcut, webalign.net, which will redirect you to our website for WebAlign. On behalf of Greg and myself, thank you for taking the time to view our presentation. If you have any questions or would like to discuss this topic more, please feel free to reach out to us using our contact information, grogers@outlookbiz.co and jeffrey.singleton@convergeaccessibility.com. Thank you and have a great day.